Hi, thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Ksenia. I'm the president of this Young Americans for Liberty chapter. And this is my vice president, Anthony Seeley, and we're very happy to present this event to you today. We're going to be talking about free speech on college campuses and what it means and our constitutional rights in education. So I'd like to read to you all something very important. It reads something like this. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Do you all know where that's coming from? Hopefully. That is the First Amendment. And you know how campuses sometimes try to restrict free speech? Well, the First Amendment is the only speech code that we need. Universities infringe on free speech in several different ways. For instance, many have speech zones. Montclair fortunately doesn't have a speech zone, but in some colleges, there are only certain zones where you can peaceably assemble, like the First Amendment says, and where you can express your opinion. But in schools all around the country, for instance, there are lots of cases of students being too shy to state opinions if their professors disagree with them. In our own university, one time I was walking along and I saw a group of students tabling who didn't reserve the right to table 2 weeks ahead of time. And so they were tabling there, not bothering anybody. Nobody else had reserved that space, yet some policemen had accosted them and basically forced them to leave. It was 2 or 3 policemen, I don't remember. So that just goes to show that even though this is a public university and they're supposed to be respecting our laws, they're supposed to be for the public, they're really infringing on our constitutional rights. Universities often intrude on free speech in order to avoid offending people. This seems like a noble goal, but it is still unconstitutional. Rules that regulate free speech are illegal. They go against the Constitution, and universities that make speech codes like this are breaking the law, especially public universities. So colleges are supposed to be spaces for free discourse, but inadvertently they intrude on constitutional rights in the name of political correctness. And we don't think that's right. We want to protect free speech, and this is what this event is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ksenia. All right, as Ksenia said, I'm Anthony Seeley, Vice President of Young Americans for Liberty here at Montclair. And again, before I go on, I'd like to thank everyone that came. I'd like to thank Josie over there for coming to speak out. Give Joe a hand. I'd like to thank everyone from the Tea Party here or not here who has supported us in the past and is supporting us now. I'd like to thank Peter Bonilla from FIRE coming out tonight, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, for whom without him Joe would not be standing illegally on this campus right now. And I'd like to thank everyone else who's ever helped us, at this event. So, continuing off of what Ksenia said, for too long now, public universities have suppressed speech with which they don't agree in an attempt to exchange our free-flowing thought process, which we enjoyed so much that has resulted in a never-ending progression of humanity, for a cheap gold-plated veil of political correctness, as Ksenia said. And for far too long have these institutions been successful. It's very unfortunate. Montclair State has chosen time and time again to defend and side with sides that it agrees with, and to try and shun people who don't agree with them. And in our instance, Montclair has chosen time and time again to side with the authoritarian, violent left and shun the freedom-fighting libertarians and small government conservatives. Now, before I go on, let me get this clear. If I was in charge, I wouldn't pick and choose any speech. I would allow anyone to say anything. Now, that being said, let's look at Montclair's track record, because I think that's important here. So you may recall we had an event a few months back, maybe September, October, November. Steve Lonigan came in here and spoke about economic freedom. It was a very good event, and I think people had a good time. And it was all going well until the Q&A section, where someone from an opposing political group, who is known as the Radical Socialist Group here on campus, heckled Mr. Lonigan. He asked him about a sign incident that happened in his town, and before he can let Lonigan answer, he just cut him off, yelled at him, called him a racist, called him a fascist. Many people in the audience had asked him to just listen to his answer. I mean, how can you ask a guy a question and not listen? And when we asked him that, he just responded with, "I don't give rights to fascists." I don't know, that's kind of ironic to me, I don't know about you guys, because you're labeling someone prior to knowing them. And the left especially is all peace and love until you disagree with what they say, then your back's against the wall with a gun. So you're all familiar with that. And to follow up on this, we had an event after that. We had a Young Americans for Liberty national sponsored event, a debate, with which we had a liberal versus a libertarian, Yuri Maltsev, versus Dr. David Thomas from New York as the conservative. Now, the liberal speaker actually teaches here in the Department of English. His name is Grover Furr, and he is a self-declared communist, and he was debating the position, and a gentleman got up, and he was clearly a libertarian during the Q&A session, and he asked Grover Furr, what would you think if I chose to opt out of Social Security? What would you think if I chose to opt out of all government programs and want nothing in return? What would you think if I wanted to raise my son on my own merit and not depend on government? Would you put a gun to my head and tell me that I had to participate in this implicit social contract? Now, Grover Furr immediately said yes. Yes, he would put a gun to this kid's head to participate. He then went on to say that this idea of the individual is nothing but an illusion, and that we are societal creatures from the start. There is no such thing as an individual. That kind of propaganda has led to a lot of trouble in the past, and Mr. Furr is very, very familiar with this. In fact, he went on to defend Stalin. A man from the audience asked him, you know, you're here defending Stalin and communism. 30, 40, 50, 60 million people have died at the hands of communist regimes. He said, is that not enough for you, Grover Furr? How many people need to die before you realize that it's not working and it's not right? Grover Furr responded saying, it's not true. No one died. He said, quote, I have yet to find one crime, one murder that Stalin has committed, because he's apparently been researching this for years. I don't know where he's been researching, but that is clearly wrong. Our president, Ksenia, explained to Furr online at a later date that her grandmother died in a gulag. And Grover Furr was saying, you know, I can't dispute the fact that she died in a gulag, but I can dispute the fact that it's linked to communism and Stalin. So this man is very, very ridiculous. There was a viral video of it. A lot of people were calling him crazy, rightfully so. Now, Montclair defended his speech. So Montclair defended the speech of the heckler of Lonigan, and Montclair defended the speech of someone who could be considered worse than a Holocaust denier, denying the death of 50 to 60 million people at the hands of Stalin. And in fact, our efforts, for lack of a better term, pissed them off. And they published a newspaper article in the school newspaper and made front page entitled, The Defamation of Grover Furr. Attacks against professor proved to be nothing but Red Scare. Nothing but a Red Scare. For us merely to ask this man to admit that Stalin and communist regimes has killed 50 to 60 million people over a span of time. So they'll pick and choose that speech, but they won't defend us when we try and have Lonigan come speak, where the business department rips down our posters and lectures our treasurer at the time over here on why he should vote for Obama for 2 hours. It's ridiculous. A lot of people have suffered at the hands of Montclair's oppressive laws, and here to speak about his experiences with Montclair, in particular the last Lonigan event, is graduate student, colleague, and fellow Young Americans for Liberty member, Josie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Josie, and I've been a student here for about 6 years, and I'd like to add more to what Anthony was saying. The reason I am here has to do with the very public ordeal that I went through that you were all well aware of 2 months ago. And I would like to spread awareness. It is imperative that we as citizens are cognizant of our First Amendment rights when they are being violated and how necessary it is to fight back when it happens. In this country, it is illegitimate for a non-legislative entity to try to make laws or regulations that obstruct constitutional amendments. And it's hubris for various administrations to think otherwise, as fire shown this one. This arrogance that pervades academia nationwide is not something new. Its roots go back 50 years. The left of the 1960s, the so-called Vietnam War protesters and such, retreated into academia afterwards. They claimed to be classical liberals and to have the rights of the masses in mind. Instead, they champion all sorts of causes, such as revisionist Cold War history, like Grover Furr, who whitewashed Soviet crimes against humanity and pretend they never happened, to supporting pro-terrorist group leaders like the former Weather Underground leader Bill Ayers, who was allowed to speak on campus fine. They are against classical liberal values and freedom. They view the Constitution as amorphous, which is why they are chronically trying to change it and modify it in order to suit their own agenda. They don't want a free exchange of ideas and fair play. Instead, they simply want to indoctrinate and to dominate. Most current academic administrations are a result of this very brainchild. They view education as a perpetual laboratory for indoctrination into their way of thinking, and they are constantly coming up with new ways to try to correct pupils and remove any form of free thought, which is why we have political correctness. As you know, it's disgusting. Christians bad, Muslims good, vice versa. I'm not siding with either. It's just that it's very odd to have that kind of dichotomy. There are generally two types of speech two types of speech present on college campuses. There's free speech, and then there's privileged speech. Privileged speech is the one that you're allowed to without getting in trouble with the administration. The latter, obviously, is the former is what landed me in trouble with this administration here. And I'm going to wrap this up because I didn't prepare as well as Tony or Ksenia did. But it's wrong to think that you can muzzle someone that simply disagrees with you, even if they may make comments that some may find to be a tad unkosher. We all take our rights for granted until we lose them. That is why we must fight any person, group, or individual, any person or group whenever our freedoms are being in jeopardy. It is our individual responsibility as citizens of this great nation to learn and understand the Constitution and to guard it for future generations. I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Bonilla, Associate Director of Fire, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Please enjoy the pizza.
Well, I'm going to talk about a number of things tonight. I'm going to talk about Fire's experiences fighting for free speech at Montclair State University, and some of our work more generally, and then I'll be taking questions from anyone in the audience that has them. First, before I do that, I'll give a little bit of information about myself and my organization. My name is Peter Bonilla. And I've been with FIRE for about 5 years, and the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, non-legal organization. We're based in Philadelphia, and our mission since 1999 has been to defend the free speech and due process and other individual rights of university students and faculty across the nation. I work running FIRE's Individual Rights Defense Program, which means that at FIRE I am responsible for most of the daily case intake and managing FIRE's extensive caseload, which runs to about 500 or so requests for assistance from students throughout the year, meaning that I was one of the first people at FIRE to learn of Joe Aziz's plight when he came to us. A little bit about my background. FIRE, like I said, is a non-legal organization. We don't litigate, in large part because we're a small outfit with a budget of a little over $2 million a year, with a staff of only less than 20 people, many of whom are First Amendment attorneys, all of whom went to very prestigious law schools, and I would consider at the top of their field compared with just about anyone else. So we have a lot of legal expertise, a lot of legal background at FIRE. My background was different. I'm not an attorney. I've not been to law school. I'm marrying a lawyer. That's close enough. My background before I came to FIRE was in professional theater. I was a theater practitioner. I studied theater as well as economics in my undergrad years at the University of Pennsylvania, and I went after graduation for about 3 years working as the literary director of a small company in Philadelphia. So mostly what I was doing for 3 or so years there before coming to FIRE was reading and evaluating scripts, helping put new things into development, and doing a little bit of production work, a little bit of assistant directing, assistant stage managing, which is a terrible job. I'm utterly unsuited for stage management. I was much happier with a stack of plays or sitting behind the director's chair. And the mission of the company I was with, a wonderful Philadelphia company called Interact Theater Company, which is currently celebrating its 25th anniversary season, which is no small thing in the world of professional theater, as I learned from having been in there for 3 years. Interact Theater Company has a reputation nationwide for producing politically and culturally and socially provocative new plays. We're one of the most committed developers of that kind of work in the nation, and it's something that we've always been very proud of, that throughout the years we kept to our mission, even though financially it could be very difficult for us. But throughout the years, we managed to produce a lot of very provocative work, some of which pissed our audience members off quite significantly. And that was something I always enjoyed very much. And needless to say, it was an area in which my love of free speech was kind of born, I guess you would say. Unlike a lot of the people here, the members of Young Americans for Liberty, the last thing I was when I was at the University of Pennsylvania was anything remotely what you would consider politically active. I spent a lot of my time in darkened theaters, in very lonely, very barren, very cold rehearsal rooms. Really didn't have a care really for the kind of political activism and political organizing that groups like YAL engage in. And I'm always conscious. I didn't see it, but apparently Marco Rubio taking a drink of water was disastrous. So I'm gonna risk it. All right.
That's gonna go viral now.
And like I was saying, I was not a very politically active, not a very politically motivated student when I was at Penn, and I wouldn't consider myself that way now. Really, kind of my one sticking point for a long time has always been a great value for the right of freedom of speech, and a very deep-seated annoyance and frustration and a kind of anger that rises up in me anytime I witness a person who considers himself in such a place of moral privilege that they can assert themselves over another person to the idea that they don't think another person even has the right to express their opinion. I remember very specifically one instance when I was walking through the main quad at Penn, and a number of organizers with PETA, the Persons for Ethical Treatment of Animals, were giving out literature on the main quad and just being pelted with every kind of hateful thing you could say to another person, every kind of invective, from students clearly offended by the fact that the folks from PETA even had, that they had the gall to come onto this enlightened college campus and spread their message that they found so disagreeable. And I remember seeing that and thinking, that's wrong. My students are making me look bad. And that was kind of the one thing I've always went on. And 5 years ago, in April it'll be 5 years, I found my way to FIRE. Where I've been ever since, and running our defense program for the last couple of years. Getting back to what Joe was discussing earlier, I'll talk a little bit more about his case because I'm not sure that everyone here is familiar with the details. And I'll also go a little bit more into FIRE's experiences. FIRE's other experiences dealing with free speech issues at Montclair State. But what happened in Joe's case was that at this Steve Lonigan event back in August or September or whenever it was, as they discussed, one of the members of the crowd jawed at Steve Lonigan for a few minutes. And this video of this was posted online, and a number of people posted comments because people are known to comment on things that are on the internet. And Joe made a couple of contributions to this, a couple of crude contributions regarding a couple of the people who were at the event. and most famously, I guess, a reference to the legs of one of the people as resembling a pair of bleached hams. What happened after this was that Joe was given a no contact order by the administration, prohibiting all kinds of contact with this student, which is already a little bit questionable from a fire perspective. But included in this no contact order was something that that really elevated it to the level of a very clearly unconstitutional gag order, which was that Joe was prohibited from referencing his encounters with this other student, or his case, in any other form of social media, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, those are all I use. I don't even use my Facebook anymore, but other social media. And Joe found out the depths of this no contact order the hard way when he made a few references to his case on a private Facebook group. And these comments made their way back to the administration, and then from there, Joe was hit with a battery of potential conduct violations, including things like, including clearly unconstitutional things like disorderly conduct and harassment, as well as a couple of other procedural violations. And he was eventually found guilty of a couple of these conduct violations. I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but the ones related to, at least the ones related to disruption and harassment were thrown out by the university, which understood at least that that for however much commotion was caused by the comments, was caused by the speech, it was protected, it was non-threatening, it was non-harassing. He was punished in the end solely for violating this gag order that the university had no right to impose on him in the first place. And that's where fire came in. And we went to bat on Joe's behalf. And I remember coming up here, I don't remember when it was in January sometime, and setting up shop at the Six Brothers Diner. I missed my exit getting in here and wound up right by the Six Brothers Diner. I was like, hey, I remember that place. I wonder if they remember me. We did a number of local TV interviews. We had to use the Six Brothers Diner because it was technically off the Montclair State campus grounds, and the case got a lot of coverage in Jersey papers as well, including in the Star Ledger, where it got a couple of scathing editorials from their staff. And within I would say a couple of days of this case going public, the charges had all been dropped and Joe had been reinstated as a student. I meant to say his punishment, among other things, was that he had been suspended for the entirety of the spring semester. And within a couple of days of fire taking the case public, the charges were dropped. Joe was able to go back to his life as a regular graduate student. And that sort of sums up how fire tends to take a case from start to finish. Like I said, we aren't a litigating outfit. We just don't have the time or the money or the manpowers to be one. But we've worked very effectively over the years through the power of bad publicity. With universities, you really can never underestimate how averse they are to bad publicity and how much they don't like seeing how much they don't like free speech splashed across the front pages of the local newspaper. So we've worked very, very powerfully and very effectively for going on 15 years, since 1999, really using publicity as our main tool. The other kind of main tool that fire has is our educational outreach operations. Part of which includes this. Includes me and other staff members coming, speaking to groups like this, attending conferences around the country, speaking to groups throughout the year. We do I don't know how many, but probably several dozen a year. And Greg Lukianoff, our president, is particularly busy this year, and particularly spending a lot of time on the road because he has just published a new book on FIRE's work and the culture of free speech on campus and what its decline means for the future of American democracy and society. He's published a very good book, very worthwhile. I recommend everyone here find a copy and read it, called Unlearning Liberty. And as I was saying, kind of our educational outreach work involves working with a lot of college students and student groups, and increasingly a lot of very proactive college administrators in reforming speech policies that have gone wayward, reforming things like oppressive free speech zone policies, which we've overturned a number of throughout the years. Sometimes after coordinating legal efforts for the students, and sometimes as the result of just a lot of good and productive discussion with college administrations, and getting everyone to the point of, and getting them to the point of understanding that that when it comes to free speech on campus, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can make sure that your speech policies are maximally protective of the First Amendment rights of your students, which, as a state agent, a public university like Montclair State is obligated to protect. And you can have that while also making sure that your students are able to go to school in an environment free of harassment and threats and intimidation and things like that. Along the lines of our work reforming speech codes, we throughout the year rate several hundred schools on the basis of their speech codes. We publish a report every winter, our Spotlight on Speech Codes report, where we rate the policies of around 400 schools throughout the country, public and private. And we give them one of three ratings on the basis of their free speech. Either a red light rating, which is the worst, which means that if you're a public university, you have a policy on your books that is clearly on its face as written in violation of the First Amendment rights of students. The next rating after that, one step better, is our yellow light rating, and this is what Montclair State University is rated by FIRE. And this means that their policies are not on their face unconstitutional. They don't, as written, violate the First Amendment, but that they may be vaguely written or slightly broadly written so that they could be open to unconstitutional abuse by administrators. And one step better from that, our best speech code rating is a green light rating, which means that that a university has no speech policies on its books that improperly or unconstitutionally intrude on its students' rights of free speech. And I've sort of digressed a lot from where I started, which was talking about Joe's case, and I said that I would talk a little bit about some of our other encounters at Montclair State University. There's kind of a good and bad side to this coin. On the bad side is that we've had rather a lot of them over the years, 3 or 4 of them in the last few years. But in each case, we've been successful defending the rights of the students that we've come to defend. And I was looking through our kind of case history with Montclair State earlier today, and it's interesting. Some of the cases were from before I was at FIRE. I got there in April of 2008, and some of our encounters with Montclair State predate that. But the 3 major cases that we've had here are really, in a lot of ways, representative of the spectrum of problems that we see in colleges around the country in our daily work. There was a reference earlier to Bill Ayers giving a speech on the Montclair State campus. I don't remember when this was. I think it was about 2 years ago. The time really kind of bleeds together at Fire when you have so many of these. But Bill Ayers came and spoke at Montclair a couple of years ago, and the group that invited him, the Montclair State chapter of Students for a Democratic Society, on the eve of their event, got a notification from someone in the student life office, or whichever office it is, telling them, we've had a lot of complaints, we've gotten a lot of calls, a lot of emails from people who are no fans of Bill Ayers, who do not want to see him on this campus. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up this special zone outside your venue where any protesters can go, and however many police are needed to keep that area safe, we're gonna set out there, and you guys are gonna be the ones who pay for it. And this is something that Fire has seen quite a lot of times at colleges throughout the country, is universities taking the possibility of protest, or the possibility of interruption or disruption by either other students or members of the community, and using it and leveraging it against students who are bringing controversial speakers to campus, and saying, look, well, if you wanna have your event, you're gonna have to pay for all this extra security, or otherwise. And this is something that the Supreme Court has been very clear on, that public agencies like Montclair State University or any public university can't. And there's a very kind of clear and logical reason for why that is so, which is that if we lived in a kind of bizarro United States where you could bring your 100 loudest friends to protest any event in the hopes of getting it shut down. If we lived in a world where you could do that, where you could make the person, the organizers of a controversial event, and we've had a number of instances of these involving Bill Ayers over the years. We've had at least 2 of them, universities around the country, as well as one involving the equally controversial, if not more controversial, former Professor Ward Churchill. And we've had a number of these from people on the right. Quite a lot of cases involving groups that host the former new leftist turned conservative David Horowitz. We've defended a lot of groups on both sides of the political aisle against this kind of unconstitutional heckler's veto, which is what it amounts to. Because if we live in a society where we allow that, then you can, if you simply don't want to hear someone's speech, if you are that morally opposed to hearing it, then you can just make a big stink about it, make a lot of noise about it, and burden the people hosting the speech with the cost of subsidizing your disruption. And the Supreme Court has ruled very clearly that this is something you cannot do. And when Montclair State did it to Students for a Democratic Society, SDS called us, and we very quickly got in the ring with Montclair State, and fortunately we very quickly were able to get that taken care of, and the event went off more or less without a hitch, and SDS was not hit with any extra fees for hosting the speaker. And I'll briefly, I have no idea, by the way, how long how long I'm supposed to be talking. Everyone who came before me was kind of on the clock, and Joe was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to cut this short." I'm like, I didn't prepare anything particular. I just said, all right, I'm gonna come up here and talk. So forgive me if I ramble on, and if Yal, if you need to bring up the the kind of Oscar music, the Jaws theme that was playing at this year's Oscars, do so if you need to. And I'll talk very quickly about the last case that we had at Montclair State involving Montclair State's paper, The Montclarian, and this just predates my time at Fire by only a couple of months, and I don't think I'd actually gone back through our kind of archives and read through this until I was getting ready to come up here today. But back in 2008, the Montclarian became convinced that Montclair student government was violating state open meetings laws in meeting behind closed doors to pass one resolution or another. The Montclarian was convinced that they were breaking the law with how they were doing their proceedings, and they made a point of saying so. And to be sure that they were right, what the Montclarian did was they hired an outside attorney. They contracted with an attorney to discuss their issues that they were having with the SGA at the time. And what the SGA did, well, the SGA president, someone very very improbably named Ron Chicken, that was the SGA president's name in 2008. What the SGA did was they first tried to fire the attorney that the Montclarian had hired. I don't know where it thinks that it got the authority to fire a lawyer that it didn't hire, but they tried doing that. And when that failed, they demanded that the Montclarian turn over all of their internal communications between the paper and their attorney again. The Montclarian said, "No, we're not doing that. You nuts?" And then the SGA finally said, "Fine, we're just gonna freeze your funding. And you know what? Since we provide student activity funding to you, you are basically our puppet. We own your content. We have the right to do whatever we want to you," which was wrong, utterly dead wrong, for a number of reasons. Chief among them, the fact that in universities, in public universities like Montclair State, just about every public university has some sort of arrangement similar to what Montclair State has here. Every student is required to pay a certain amount of student activity fees money every semester or every year. Typically, the disbursement and management of these funds is placed in the hands of a student government, not the university administration. Universities are, students are generally required to pay this as part of their tuition bill, and the Supreme Court has ruled a number of times that that student organizations or that student governments that are tasked with distributing funds among student groups have to do so in a manner that's viewpoint neutral. I mean, they can't give out funds on the basis of what they like and what they don't like, and they can't retaliate against organizations whose activities displease them. They can't freeze the funding of newspapers who print critical columns of their internal operations. And quite a lot of student governments over the years have tried to do that. We've seen a number of student governments that have gone after the funding of their newspapers for printing things that are too unflattering to the student government. In their minds, the papers like the Montclarian are often they're supposed to be a kind of, in their opinion, a mouthpiece of the student government, only supposed to print positive things. And student newspapers have no obligation whatsoever to do this. They are independent publications with their own First Amendment rights, and they can, when it comes to that, publish what they damn well please. So Fire got involved on behalf of the Montclarian. This is in January or February 2008, and this was after the student government's actions had prompted a lot of national outrage. Papers like the New York Times were chiming in on it. Organizations like the ACLU, not to mention Fire, and a number of other nonprofits were condemning the very, for lack of a better word, ham-fisted actions of the student government. And very quickly, Fire prevailed there as well, using the power of bad publicity to kind of shame the student government into compliance. The university administration was very quick, was very responsive to us there. And that's kind of, those three cases, they're kind of, that's a fairly good cross-section of a lot of the types of cases that we see. And I could stand up here for hours and hours and hours and hours talking about the variety of cases that we get throughout the year. I'm not going to. Don't worry about that. At this point, I'm pretty happy to turn things over to the floor and start taking questions.